If that was civil or criminal?
No, I don't remember.
And really, whether they are civil or criminal, as Mr. Gray said, the bottom line question is, if you're a juror here, you got to set aside what you learned there and apply just the law that Judge Chu gives to you for this case.
Yes.
And you think you'd have any difficulty doing that?
No.
Sounds like those were back a ways in time as well.
Yes.
All right. You talked about the trauma that brought attention to Minneapolis, and it sounds like, well, you recognize that some good and bad to that, the events that led to that kind of attention. Do you understand what I mean?
Yes.
The demonstrations, do you think had some positives to them?
I believe that it is a good time for us as a society to examine these issues that were brought forth by these events, and it's really an important time to look at these issues.
And do you think that, recognizing your duty as a juror is just what happens in this courtroom?
Yes.
Okay. So you have no difficulty setting aside sort of experiences from before this year and just focusing on your job as a juror if you're selected?
No.
I think you rather candidly and understandably expressed, sadness for really both sides of this.
Not sure what the issue is. Here, it's back.
Be able to set those emotions aside if you were a juror and selected in this case and decided only on the evidence.
Yes.
And like what happens to a person's career is you can answer the question then.
Could you restate it?
Yeah. So, that sadness over what happens to a person's career is not part of the evidence, may not be part of the evidence that, is part of the trial.
You're right, yes.
And
I
you could,
agree with that.
and if it's not evidence in the trial, you can set that emotion
Yes.
aside.
Yes.
There was that chart of responses, I agree and disagree. Do you remember that? It was some time ago you had to answer this.
Are you referring to a specific?
In the questionnaire, there.
Right, I remember that section, yes.
You indicated that the question was, I do not trust the police, and you said you somewhat disagree. So do you remember why you chose somewhat disagree there about do not trust the police?
Well, I generally trust the police, but there are occasions when we cannot trust the police.
They're people too. Is that fair?
Pardon me?
They are people too.
Right.
Obviously, this case involves a police officer. You think you can be a fair and impartial juror in a case involving a police officer's actions?
Yes.
If you can excuse me for just a moment, Your Honor, may I have a moment, please?
Yes.
Thank you, Juror 57, Your Honor. That's all the questions I have, and we would pass the juror for those.
You're going to be on this jury. We're going to start December 8th, and you will get a call from the jury office to confirm the time and the date, but that's what we expect will happen. All right?
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Have a great rest of the day. All right.
Judge, are the jurors told not to read the news because there was an article this morning that was quite extensive in the Minneapolis paper about jurors and who's an alternate and who isn't, and they really shouldn't know that.
Yeah, they're told, they've been told before, and I think when they go through orientation, they're told again. They're told both in writing and orally. But, you know, I'll make sure if you still have concerns, I warn them not to look at any newspaper articles about the case or whatever. But,
I understand.
yeah.
As far as they've been told that it's
Yeah. But, you know, I think it was reported what the practice is in Hennepin County on alternates, so. Okay. Are you ready for the next juror? Okay. Thank you, Deputy. Oh, yes, that's right, we're doing the panel. Okay, we have fresh ones. Counsel, I know you probably slipped. No first names, please. Do not use first names. I think you called your client Kim, so please refrain from doing that. Okay?
police wasn't here.
True.
It's getting better.
All right, please be seated. Good morning, members of the jury panel. I'm Regina Chu, and I'll be the presiding judge in this case. I want to start out by saying thank you. Thank you for interrupting your normal routine. Thank you for fulfilling such an important civic obligation. You know, we're living in really trying times. So it is with extra heartfelt appreciation from the entire justice system for your appearing and responding to your jury summonses. Upholding the rights that we cherish, the right to a trial by jury and the right to a speedy trial in trying, unusual times is the American way. You validate these constitutional rights by appearing today and by proving your willingness to serve. You jurors really are our heroes. You are ordinary people who are called upon to do extraordinary work to make sure that our justice system moves forward, even in the midst of a pandemic. You are upholding the Constitution, the very foundation of our democracy, and we could not do this without you. Now, not all of us can serve in the military, but we all can do our civic duty by serving as jurors. Our justice system would not work without good citizens like you. I'm saying thank you again because I really can't say thank you enough. All right, as you know, this is a criminal case in which the state of Minnesota has charged the defendant, Kimberly Potter, with the following charges. Count 1 is first-degree manslaughter predicated on reckless use or handling of a firearm. That count alleges that on or about April 11, 2021, in Brooklyn Center, Hennepin County, Minnesota, defendant Kimberly Ann Potter caused the death of Dante Demetrius Wright while committing the misdemeanor offense of reckless handling or use of a firearm so as to endanger the safety of another with such force and violence that death or great bodily harm to any person was reasonably foreseeable. Count 2 alleges second-degree manslaughter, and that count alleges that on or about April 11, 2021, in Brooklyn Center, Hennepin County, Minnesota, defendant Kimberly Ann Potter caused the death of Dante Demetrius Wright by her culpable negligence, whereby Kimberly Potter created an unreasonable risk and consciously took a chance of causing death or great bodily harm to Dante Demetrius Wright while using or possessing a firearm. The defendant has pleaded not guilty. That plea denies the charges and places upon the state of Minnesota the burden of proving defendant guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. The state is represented by Mr. Matt Frank, Ms. Erin Eldridge, Mr. Josh Larson, and Mr. Raul Shah. The defendant is represented by Mr. Earl Gray, Mr. Paul Ng, and Ms. Amanda Montgomery. And I want to introduce you to a couple of other people that will play critical roles in this case. You've already met my staff, but my law clerk is Mr. Zach Kramer, and my judicial clerk is Ms. Jessica Bauer. Mr. Kramer and Ms. Bauer are responsible for taking care of all administrative matters If you need to get a message to me of a personal nature, please let my staff know and they'll make sure the message gets to me. Seated in front of me is Ms. Carly Davis. She is a certified court reporter that is responsible for taking down all the testimony and keeping a formal record of the proceedings. This means that when you respond to questions, you must speak loudly and clearly so that our court reporter can make an accurate record. Also, because the court reporter is taking down everything that is said in the courtroom, if you have to answer orally with the with a yes or a no instead of shaking your head. And please don't say and in response to questions, because that doesn't make for a clear record. A couple of logistics before we get started on jury selection. As you know, masks are required at all times. The only time that you may remove your mask is when you are in the witness box being questioned by me and the attorneys. Now, let me give you an idea of what jury selection is going to look like. There will be group questioning that I will do, and then individual questioning. During group questions, I will ask you to raise your hand or not raise your hand in response to my questions. An oral response is not required nor asked for. Then, after I'm done with my group questions, I will question you individually. I know all of you have filled out a rather lengthy questionnaire. The individual questioning is expected to be very short. I'll just have some follow-up questions to some of the answers in your questionnaire. And after I get done, the attorneys may have some questions for you also. When we do individual questioning, I will do you one at a time, and I will dismiss the other jurors to the waiting room. Okay? Please know that we can't always control the temperature in the courtroom consistently, so dress in layers. You're allowed to bring something into the courtroom to drink as long as it has a cap on it. All right? Now, delays. I know that you're taking time out of your daily life to be here, so I try to keep the delays as short as possible or not at all. But in other words, I try to take care of all legal matters with the lawyers before you come in the morning, or deal with them after you leave for the day. But sometimes unanticipated issues come up, and I'm required to deal with those issues during the trial. So if you're chosen as a juror, please understand that I apologize for that, but sometimes it can't be helped, because it's so important for you as jurors to hear only the appropriate evidence that you should consider in deciding this case. Okay, so I hope you will understand if there are delays. I would suggest that you bring something to read if you're chosen as a juror, just so that there's something to occupy you in the event that there is a more than lengthy delay, which I don't anticipate, but might happen. Okay. All right. I'm going to give you some preliminary instructions. There are rules of law that apply in a criminal case. A complaint is not evidence. It creates no inference or presumption of guilt. No member of the jury should in any way be prejudiced against Ms. Potter because a complaint has been filed against her, or because she is on trial. The defendant is presumed innocent. In order for you to find the defendant guilty, the state must prove guilt. The defendant does not have to prove her innocence. The presumption of innocence remains with the defendant until and unless the defendant has been proven guilty beyond a reasonable doubt by evidence admitted in this trial. Now, a common misperception of the American criminal justice system is that the jury determines whether the accused person is guilty.
Bare minimum what we need to get done. But in these times, a bipartisan cooperation is worth recognition. So I want to thank Senators Schumer and McConnell and Speaker Pelosi for getting this done. And I want to thank a substantial bipartisan vote in the Senate for sending this bill to my desk today to avoid disruptions of government operations. And I want to urge Congress to use the time this bill provides to work toward a bipartisan agreement on a full-year funding bill that makes the needed investments in our economy and our people, from public health to education to national security. Now, for today's news. Every year, December brings the joys of the holiday season and gives us an opportunity to reflect on the year gone by and look ahead and begin to imagine the new year to come. This year, we can reflect on an extraordinary bit of progress. Our economy is markedly stronger than it was a year ago, and today, the incredible news that our unemployment rate has fallen to 4.2%. At this point in the year, we're looking at the sharpest one-year decline in unemployment ever. Simply put, America is back to work, and our jobs recovery is going very strong. Today's historic drop in unemployment rate includes dramatic improvements for workers who have often seen higher wages and higher levels of unemployment. They are receiving higher wages. And the rate of Black and Hispanic unemployment is also dropping sharply. But that's not just jobs that are up. Wages are up, especially for hardworking Americans, often ignored in the past, and past recoveries. Workers in transportation and warehouses have seen their wages go up approximately 10% this year. Workers in hotels and restaurants have seen their wages go up 13% this year. And thanks to the American Rescue Plan, we've delivered significant tax cuts to families raising children. Tax cuts and raising wages for middle-class families mean that Americans, on average, have more in their pockets today than they did each month since we've been in office, than they did last year after accounting for inflation. Let me repeat that. Even after accounting for rising prices, the typical American family has more money in their pockets than they did last year. In fact, we're the only leading economy in the world where household income and the economy as a whole are stronger than they were before the pandemic. Applications for new small businesses are up 30% compared to before the pandemic. Thanks to the American Rescue Plan, we're cutting child poverty in America by more than 40%, and millions of children who spent last Christmas in poverty will not bear that burden this holiday season. Today's news means that unemployment rate has now fallen by more than 2 percentage points since I took office. That's the fastest decline in a single year on record, and it's about 3 times faster than any other president in their first year in office. The number of people claiming unemployment has fallen from 18 million when I took office to 2 million this week, another record drop. We've also learned today that in November, 235,000 jobs were created in the private sector. And when they went back and recalibrated, they found the last 2 months, they found that job growth over the prior 2 months, September and October, actually created 82,000 more jobs than had previously been reported, which means that we've averaged nearly 400,000 new jobs a month over the last 3 months, a solid pace. All told, in the first 10 full months of my administration, the economy has created 6 million jobs, a record for a new president. This is a significant improvement from when I took office in January, a sign that we're on the right track. Because of the extraordinary strides we've made, we can look forward to a brighter, happier new year ahead, in my view. But I also know that despite this progress, families are anxious. They're anxious about COVID. They're anxious about the cost of living, the economy more broadly. They're still uncertain. I want you to know I hear you. It's not enough to know that we're making progress. You need to see it and feel it in your own lives, around the kitchen table, in your checkbooks. And that's why every day my team and I are working to deliver consistent, determined, focused action to overcome the challenges we still face. Now, chief among those challenges is COVID-19. Yesterday, I laid out key actions we're going to take this winter to fight this virus, to protect one another, to protect our economy and our economic recovery. They include, number one, expanding our nationwide booster campaign with more outreach, more appointments, and more hours. I was thrilled to see that yesterday we had more vaccine shots administered than any day in the past 6 months. Number two, we're launching hundreds of new family vaccination clinics to make it easier for children, parents, the whole family to get vaccinated in one place, and new policies to keep children in school instead of quarantining them at home when someone in the class comes down with COVID, if they do. Thirdly, making free at-home tests more available than ever before by having them covered by our private health insurance plans. The availability of community health centers and other sites for the uninsured will be the alternative as well. So if you have insurance, it will cover these tests. And if you don't have insurance, we have facilities you can attend and get these tests. Increasing our surge response is the fourth thing, our surge response teams. They're made up of doctors and nurses and medical staff who go into communities with rising cases and provide the needed staff for overrun hospitals, for their emergency rooms, their intensive care units, to get help to them as they need it. And we're about tripling the number of those surge teams. Fifth, we're accelerating our efforts to vaccinate the rest of the world and strengthening international travel rules for people coming into the United States. This is a plan all Americans can rally behind, in my view. We're also addressing another concern for families, prices. Just about every country is grappling with high prices right now as they fight the pandemic. And as the world economy continues to come back to life, the more price pressures are going to ease as things begin to move. But we're not sitting around waiting. In the meantime, I've used every tool available to address price increases, and it's beginning to work. Take gasoline and gas prices. Last week, I announced the largest ever release from the United States Strategic Petroleum Reserve to increase the supply of oil and help bring down prices. And I brought together other countries, India, Japan, the Republic of Korea, the United Kingdom, who all agreed to join me in releasing additional oil from their reserves. And China made do more as well. They haven't done it yet. This worldwide effort we're leading won't solve the problem of high gas prices overnight. But over the last month, likely due in part to the anticipation of this action, we've seen oil and gas prices out of the wells, oil and gas prices on the wholesale market come down significantly. Since the end of October, the average weekly price of gasoline on the wholesale market, that's what you sell to the gas stations, has fallen around 10%. And that decline has picked up in recent days. That's a drop of about 25 cents per gallon. These savings are beginning to reach Americans and should pick up in the weeks ahead. And it can't happen fast enough. And I've asked the Federal Trade Commission to consider whether potentially illegal and anti-competitive behavior in the oil and gas industry is causing higher prices for consumers when they don't need to be that high because the wholesale prices come down so much. So we can assure the American people are paying a fair price for gas. At this time of the year, another concern is facing American families is about being able to find what you need in the holidays, whether it's gifts or groceries. As I laid out earlier in the week, because of my actions, the actions that my administration has taken, in partnership with business, with private business and labor, retailers and grocery stores, freight movers and railroads, the shelves of our stores are going to be well stocked. We've sped up operations at our ports, For example, at the Port of Los Angeles and Long Beach, the two busiest ports in America, over the last month, the number of containers left sitting on the docks for over 8 days is down by 40%. I've said that before, and people have come to me and said, well, what does that mean? And so they're down 40%. Well, it means that the product are no longer sitting on the docks. They're getting off the docks, into trains, into trucks, into vehicles to get them to the store shelves. This is an incredible success story. On Monday, I convened a group of CEOs from some of the largest retailers and grocery stores, as well as leading companies that works with small businesses across the country. And they reported that their investments are up, shelves are well stocked, and they're ready to meet consumer demand for the holidays. Now, I said that yesterday, and then I saw a couple of your stations put on, you found some empty shelves. They're old empty shelves, but it doesn't matter. But go back and take a look at some of those shelves again, okay? But the point is that the vast majority of the shelves are filled, and the CEOs of not only the suppliers, but the CEOs of UPS and FedEx, which are on track to deliver more packages than ever, are saying the same thing. So we're heading into holiday season in strong shape. Again, this is about a concerted, focused action. We averted this potential crisis by figuring out what needed to be fixed, and then we brought together the people who have the capacity to fix it, or at least alleviate it. Now it's time to build on the success we had this year on jobs, wages, creation of more small business, and fixing challenges in the economy. We need to cut costs further for families. That's what my Build Back Better plan does. It's still being considered in Congress. It will lower the out-of-pocket cost for child care, elder care, housing, college, health care, and prescription drugs. In fact, a new independent analysis released this week showed that my plan would mean $7,400 in tax cuts and savings for the typical family of 4 with 2 children. 17 Nobel Prize winners in economics have written a letter to me affirming that this bill would reduce long-term inflationary pressures in the economy. And 2 of the leading rating agencies, not liberal think tanks, 2 of the leading rating agencies on Wall Street confirmed this month that my plan will not add to inflationary pressures. What I've always proposed, and I'm proposing now, is have a way of lower some of the most difficult costs. And what are they? The difficult costs families pay every month by asking corporations and the wealthiest Americans, including, for example, the 55 corporations that paid 0 in federal income tax last year, despite generating $40 billion in profits, and I'm happy they're profitable, to begin to pay their fair share. For example, just requiring corporations to pay a minimum 15% in taxes raises enough revenue to pay for lowering the cost of child care for 90% of families and provides universal preschool for all 3 and 4-year-olds in America. Now, what's better for those corporations? Is it better for them having child care so parents can come back to work today and they have a better educated workforce in the future? Or keep not paying any tax? Once again, no one making less than $400,000 a year will pay a penny more in federal taxes. My Build Back Better plan is fiscally responsible. It's the first major piece of legislation in more than a decade that's not only fully paid for, but will generate more than $100 billion in deficit reduction this decade. It fully covers the cost of its investments by making the largest corporations, the richest Americans, pay a little more in taxes. I think that's a trade-off that's worth making. And by the way, those very businesses are going to do better having a better educated and more available workforce. Having those who've done very well pay their fair share is just the right thing to do in order to provide a little breathing room for millions of American families. Throughout our history, we've emerged from crisis by investing in ourselves. And so we're going to keep at this. We're going to keep making progress for our families and for our nation. I promise you that's what's going to happen. God bless you all, and may God protect our troops and keep everyone safe.
Mr. President, First of all, Mr. President, your voice sounds a little different. Are you okay?
I'm okay. I have a test every day to see a COVID test. They check me for all the strands. What I have is a 1.5-year-old grandson who had a cold who likes to kiss his pop. And he'd been kissing anyway, so, but it's just a cold.
And then, so on COVID policy, it seems like the administration is starting to soften some of the language. There's this new op-ed where you talk about COVID and we are going to beat it back. Are you no longer going to shut it down?
No, we got to beat it back before we shut it down. Look, this is going to take time worldwide. In order to beat COVID, we have to shut it down worldwide. In the United States of America, we're doing everything that needs to be done to take care of the American people within our borders. But look what's happened. You know, we're starting to make some real progress, and you find out there's another strain. And the idea that you can build a wall around America to keep any COVID from around the world out is not there. And besides, that's one of the reasons why I know we get criticized, I get criticized for not doing more for the world. But we've done more for the world in providing vaccines available and help than any nation, every other nation in the world combined. In addition to that, we've also, with regard to India and other countries, and we're working around the clock. Remember, I suggested we suspend the patents. Let everybody be able to have access to this so they can make the vaccine in their own countries. And thirdly, in Southern Africa, for example, South Africa has all the vaccines they need. They don't want any more vaccines now. One of the things I'm considering is how can we help them deal with the issue of as I said to you before, when the biggest challenge we had in the beginning of this administration, in my view, was not getting the vaccines produced, although that was not easy. And I've got to give, President Trump early on went out and got them to do the research to try to get the right vaccines. But logistically, getting the vaccine from a container that gets delivered to you, to a hospital, to a state, and getting it in someone's arms, that's a very, very difficult thing. And we did it better than anybody in the world has done it, but we're going to try to help other people.
Mr. President, given that there are now multiple cases of Omicron here in the U.S., are you considering requiring vaccines for domestic travel or any other new measures for domestic travel?
The measures that I announced yesterday we believe, are sufficient to deal with the proper medical precautions to deal with the spread of this new variant. We are doing, as you know, at NIH, as well as among the manufacturers, a lot of research to see the extent of how quickly it spreads, how deadly it is, et cetera, et cetera. But we do require, for travel, we're going to continue to require the people to have masks on, and in public places, and so, and in federal buildings. So, but I don't at this point, because I think I know a fair amount about this issue, but I'm not a scientist. So I continue to rely on the scientists and asking them whether or not we have to move beyond what we did yesterday. Right now, they're saying no.
What is happening in Ukraine, and what on the border between Ukraine and Russia, and what are you going to do about it?
I have been in constant contact with our allies in Europe, with the Ukrainians. My Secretary of State and National Security Advisor have been engaged extensively. And what I am doing is putting together what I believe will be the most comprehensive and meaningful set of initiatives to make it very, very difficult for Mr. Putin to go ahead and do what people are worried he may do. But that's in play right now.
Vaccine mandates. Our vaccine mandates holding people back from jobs.
Oh boy. All right, I'll switch back to the trial in just a second. I want to give some facts. I actually tweeted this out a few minutes ago. It's pretty good. I mean, he's continued to lie over and over and over, and that's fine. Biden continues to lie to the American public. This is my tweet from a few minutes ago. In November 2019, we had 1.9 million continuing unemployment claims. So those are the claims that happen every month, and they do a breakdown. The Bureau of Labor Statistics puts it out every single month. In 2019, because you can't look at last year because the numbers were still high because of all the Democrats locking down cities and all the mandates and stuff, especially in November, because they released them all right around December. As soon as the election was done, they released them all. But in November 2019, pre-COVID, we had 1.9 million continuing claims. Today, we have 2.4 million. Now, in 2019, we had a total number of unemployed at 5.9 million people. Today, according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, we have a total of 6.9 million people. So all this is talk about setting up new jobs and building back better, quicker than any other president. It's all garbage, because what he's doing is he's taking the numbers of people that were released from their jobs and saying that when they went back to work that he created those jobs, which is completely not true. The jobs number report today caught everyone's eye because here's a couple of reasons. One, because payrolls only grew by 210, which was less than half of what the leading economists actually believed it was going to be. They thought we were going to add 534,000 new jobs. So that's the payrolls. That's how many people go back to work. It doesn't mean new jobs. That's what they call it, is new jobs. But it just means either people are returning to work off unemployment or people finding new jobs. But that number in October was 530. In September, it was over 5 as well. So it showed that it was going well. And that would have worked really well if it actually happened this month as well, because then it would have, like, the stock market would have shot up and everything. It would have been really good for the economy, except it didn't happen. The U.S. economy added back fewer jobs than expected, but yet the unemployment rate fell, which is really weird because a lot of people are like, wait, how does that happen? How does the unemployment number go down, but the jobless number is less than half of what they thought, or the jobs number is less than half of what they thought it was going to be going into it. They anticipated, like I said, sorry, I was wrong. I thought it was 534. It's actually 550,000 is what all the economists were believing. We were going to add 550,000 jobs in the month of November. It turns out we only added 210. It's insane, which doesn't make a lot of sense because the unemployment number dropped lower than the expected amount. The expected amount was 4.5%, and they that's what it was expected, and it was 4.6% in October, so they expected 1 percentage point, 1/10 of a percentage, but now they're saying it dropped down to 4.2. So it's got all these economists on social media right now, on Twitter and everything. They're like, this doesn't make sense. Like, how does the unemployment numbers go down, and yet the payrolls report, so the people that actually went back to work, those numbers aren't adding up. So it's causing a lot of people to be like, what the hell? That's why the press was acting like they were there, because there's so many questions about this new jobs report. Simply put, it doesn't make sense. Is it real? Are these real numbers? And again, he gets out and he talks about some things like, the average earnings are down or are lower than expectations, which was good. Is that good? I don't even know. The average hourly earnings year over year was down as well, which I suppose that wouldn't be good because you would want a higher earning per hour. But it's kind of crazy. U.S. employers have added back jobs on every net so far in 2021. Now they're worried that this has to do with the Omicron and Omicron and all that stuff. And I tell you what, it's not good. The headline was a miss largely due to muted $2,300 rise in leisure and hospitality payrolls, indicating the winter wave of virus inspections is now weighing on the sector, with new cases on the rise even before the potential impact of the variant, which is because of the Biden administration, which is because of the media. Everyone hyped up this Omicron thing, and so now see, that's the thing. They say that, but I don't even know if that's true, because these are November jobs report. This new Omicron Omicron variant wasn't even discovered until the 24th, and we didn't put travel restrictions in place until the 26th, which means we only had 4 days left of the month for that to impact travel. So you're saying they're all, this is the thing, some of the economists are being like, we don't understand it because Omicron only affected the last 4 or 5 days of November. So how are you saying, well, people aren't going out to eat because of that, because of this new variant? They're scared. That's what some of these people are trying to go. Payroll gain in November jobs report disappointed sharply compared to expectations. Job growth in October and September were each upwardly revised. They're saying payrolls grew in 546% in October, which Biden talked about. In September, 531. So it went up 13,000 payrolls for October, and then they added September as well by 57,000 jobs they added for September. So that's what Biden talked about today. He didn't talk about the disappointing job numbers, which is why all the reporters were like, well, oh my God, why aren't you actually answering? Why aren't you saying anything? So the White House press conference today is scheduled for 1:30. We are definitely going to be live streaming that because, well, they're likely going to flip out. And I wonder if because of the publicity of her snubbing the South African reporter, I wonder, one, if he's even going to be there or they took him out of the press pool for the way he was acting yesterday. And we talked about this last night. I'm not going to go into it. I'll do it real quick. South African reporter, Simon something, I forgot his last name, but he has been repeatedly trying to get questions. Yesterday, he flat out told Jen Psaki she was lying. But he's been repeatedly asking questions about why there's lockdowns, why they put the air flight restrictions and the travel restrictions on several African countries that don't even have Omicron cases there at all. And he said, and basically when she was saying whatever she was saying yesterday, he's like, you're lying. You're lying. Just called her out. She refused to answer questions from him yesterday. She refused to answer questions the day before. Is she being, discriminatory towards the South African journalist? I personally believe she is, but that's my personal belief because I just think the Biden administration is racist. But despite a solid rehiring throughout the year, labor force participation remains short of pre-pandemic levels. That's what we talked about with the unemployment numbers. Remember, 2.4 million people unemployed. Those are people that are still filing for claims. And then they use a rough number of 6.9 million as the people whose unemployment benefits ran out and are still looking for jobs. Now, these numbers are really important because they don't account for the people that just said, screw it, we're not going to work anymore. And a lot of people are saying we're not actually going to figure that out until mid next year because all the people that switched to doing social media stuff, all the people that went to OnlyFans and all that, we're not going to know about their job status because technically they're employed, but they're not, considered as part of this because they don't have actual payrolls. So it's going to be pretty interesting, but I thought I'd just give you that breakdown. All you guys already knew that he was lying to everybody. I know you did, but I figured it would be interesting, or I figured I should tell you what was going on so that way you could understand why I even decided to broadcast that, because normally I don't. Normally I don't broadcast his speeches because he's an idiot. My personal opinion. Anyway, we're going to switch back to this trial. It should be completed. They only had to seat 2 additional jurors, and they may have done that already. If they did do that, live stream will end. I'll put something on Citizen Stringer and our 24-hour Rumble page, which is back up. And then when the White House press conference, I'm actually going to, you know what? Man, I'm tired of watching the trial, and I know it sucks, but the jury selection, I think she's done because she's just talking to because the COVID thing is coming up too. Man, my ear itches, plus I'm hungry. I got to go home and eat. Stomach's better, finally. We had a big celebration this morning, my kids and I, because it was finally put together. You know what I'm saying? So yeah, there is. So you know what I'm going to do is I'm going to throw up the coronavirus response because I'm curious to hear what they have to say. And again, I control what we watch here. So that's what I'm going to do. And if you don't like it, I don't know what to tell you. You're kind of SOL there because I do what I want. All right, let me throw that up. Ready?
Improving ventilation, physical distancing, and increased testing to slow transmission of the virus. I want to take a moment to emphasize the importance of staying vigilant. There is still a lot to learn about Omicron, and we will be transparent and share the updated science with you as soon as it becomes available. As you have heard me say earlier this week, we are in a far better position now than we were at this time last year. Not only do we now have knowledge and experience from addressing other variants, such as Delta, we also have far more tools with proven prevention methods and more treatment options to fight the virus than we had at this time last year. Thank you. I'll now turn things over to Dr. Fauci.
Thank you very much, Dr. Walensky. What I'd like to do now is to spend a short amount of time on discussing the potential role of our boosting in addressing the Omicron variant. Okay, I can have the first slide, please. Just to orient people, well, we always talk about spike proteins and variants. On the left-hand part of the slide is the spike protein of the Delta, and on the right is the Omicron. You see those red numbers and letters on the left with Delta, and the thing that is striking right off is the fact that those represent amino acid substitutions as a result of mutations. And notice how many more there are on the Omicron side. So just to orient you what that means, for example, if you look on the left with Delta, on the very top, you see T478K. All that means is that an amino acid substitution of a threonine is substituted by a lysine. The T is the threonine, the K is the lysine, and on it goes throughout the spike protein. So next slide. Dr. Walensky has mentioned to you that we have many unanswered questions, and we are looking into them, and in real time, at a matter of days to weeks, we'll know more about transmission, immune evasion, and severity of disease. But what can we do right now? Next slide. There are a number of things that we can do. Dr. Walensky mentioned several of them. I want to focus just for a minute or two on two of those, namely getting vaccinated and getting boosted. Next slide. So let's take a look at the data when it comes to another variant. In fact, the variant that we are dealing with right now in our own country with Delta. In September of this year, unvaccinated people in the United States had almost a 6% increased risk of getting infected and getting COVID-19 compared to fully vaccinated, and about an 11-fold increased risk of being hospitalized and a 14 increase of dying when you compare individuals who are fully vaccinated versus unvaccinated. And this is Delta. Next slide. However, in vitro studies now indicate that booster shots markedly increase the antibody titers against a wide range of variants. Next slide. So if you look at this, right now, remember, we were all vaccinated, those who were vaccinated, against the ancestral or Wuhan strain. Yet when you look on this slide of the effective booster in the light blue in younger individuals is what the level of antibody titer is prior to the third shot boost. It was 55. 28 days after the boost, in this case, a third shot of the mRNA 1273, it goes way up to 872, much higher than the actual peak following the second dose. And this is reflected also in individuals greater than 65, as shown on the right-hand part of the slide. Next slide. The same holds true for the Pfizer-BioNTech. And on this, you see, again, on the left, 1 month after the second dose, take the blue column, there's 241 as the 50% serum neutralization. 1 month after the third dose, it goes way up to 1321. And then when you go to the elderly, it goes from 123 to 1495. Next slide. One of the things we now know, and it's becoming increasingly apparent, that when you get a high level of antibody, and as shown in this slide in an animal model done by Dr. Cedars and Corbett here at the NIH, when you look at the third dose, you increase the levels of neutralizing antibodies against all the variants. And this also has an increase in levels of memory B cells and T cells, which strongly suggest that boosters will give you cross protection against a number of variants. Although we haven't proven it yet, there's every reason to believe that if you get vaccinated and boosted, that you would have at least some degree of cross protection, very likely against severe disease, even against the Omicron variant. And so in the final slide, my message reflects that of Dr. Walensky. Get vaccinated and get boosted. You can visit vaccines.gov. You can text your zip code to that number there, or you can call and find out where vaccines and boosters are available. Back to you, Jeff.
Well, thank you, Dr. Walensky and Dr. Fauci. So as you just heard from both doctors, and as the president said yesterday, the Omicron variant is a cause for concern, not panic. Nearly 200 million Americans have done their part by getting fully vaccinated, and we have the tools and the know-how we need to keep people safe. Vaccines clearly remain our most important tool, and the doctor's message is crystal clear. If you are fully vaccinated before June, it's time for you to go get your booster. If you're unvaccinated, go get your first shot today. And if your kids are 5 years or older and not yet vaccinated, get them the protection of the vaccine as well. Join your fellow Americans who are rolling up their sleeves. Just yesterday, we reported getting 2.2 million shots in arms, including over 1 million booster shots. 2.2 million shots. That's our highest single day total since May. This is important progress, and the president's plan to combat COVID-19 and confront the Omicron variant this winter uses all of the tools at our disposal to build on this progress. Yesterday, the president outlined 5 areas where we are taking action. First, getting the roughly 100 million eligible Americans their booster shots. Second, helping more parents vaccinate their kids and keeping our schools open. Third, making at-home tests free to Americans. Fourth, increasing surge response teams to support communities with rising cases. And fifth, accelerating our efforts to vaccinate the rest of the world and strengthening travel rules for people coming into the United States. The president's plan is robust. We're using every tool at our disposal, with more than a dozen specific actions that will get Americans maximum protection as we head into the winter months and keep people safe, schools open, and our economy growing. Today, we want to provide additional detail on 3 specific actions in our fight against the virus this winter. First, launching a public education campaign for boosters. Second, reimbursing doctors for COVID-19 vaccine counseling. And third, expanding teams of emergency volunteers to help treat COVID patients around the country. Let me now turn to Dr. Murthy to provide more on these 3 actions. Doctor?
Well, thank you so much, Jeff. It's good to be with all of you again today. In the midst of all the uncertainty around Omicron, what you're hearing from Dr. Walensky and Dr. Fauci is that there is a global community of scientists that are doing as much as possible, as quickly as possible, to learn more about the variant. We are part of that global community, and we are optimistic that we will learn much more in the weeks ahead. And as we learn more, our administration is doubling down on its support for communities that need it the most. Today, I want to talk about 3 ways that we're providing that support: through boosters, through children's vaccines, and through medical response teams across the country. First, so far, 41 million Americans have gotten a booster shot, but we know that there are still millions of Americans more who need to get a booster shot. And so as we think about this, we recognize several things. Number one, there are still people who don't know that they're eligible. Number 2, there are seniors who may not realize the benefit of the boosters. Number 3, there are also just people working 2 or 3 jobs who haven't had the time to get boosted. And that's why we're working to meet Americans right where they are, with information about booster shots and easy access to get one. To do that, we've created a booster information toolkit and distributed it far and wide. And we're gearing up to share versions in Spanish, Mandarin, Cantonese, Vietnamese, Korean, Tagalog, Haitian Creole, Arabic, and Russian. We're doing this because we want to make sure that vaccine information is available in the language that people understand best. We're also reaching out to communities of color and Native communities by hosting health fairs, webinars, and virtual town halls. We're working through all channels where people get information: email, phone banking, text banking, podcasts, letters, social media, postcards, leaflets, and newspaper ads, just about everything short of carrier pigeons. Our goal is really to leave no stone unturned as we seek to reach people with life-saving information. And some of the many organizations we're working with in this outreach include Jack and Jill of America, the Divine Nine Sororities and Fraternities, Corazon Latino, and more than 1,200 faith leaders. Each of these partnerships will help us ensure that more people extend and enhance our protection against COVID, especially as we look forward to gathering for the holidays. Second, I want to share more about how we're supporting children and families when it comes to COVID vaccines for kids. We want to help more parents make informed decisions about vaccination. That's why Medicaid will begin to pay healthcare providers to talk to families about the importance of vaccines for kids. This is a move that will be backed by 100% federal funding. Now, Medicaid and the Children's Health Insurance Program provide insurance coverage to over 40% of all children in the United States, and they're a significant source of healthcare for children of color. This support will help more families get connected to the personalized, trusted medical advice that they need and deserve. Now, this is an issue that's near and dear to me because last week I was able to take my 5-year-old son to get vaccinated. Now, he was a little nervous, and when the time came to roll up his sleeve, I had to be right there with him and make sure he didn't run away. But he was all smiles afterwards, and he's been proudly showing off his "I'm vaccinated" sticker to family and to friends. Now, my wife and I are just two of the millions of parents out there who have been waiting for months for the opportunity to protect our children. There are few things that feel better than knowing your child is safer. And now the parents of over 4 million children, ages 5 through 11, are feeling that relief. And that number will continue to grow in the coming weeks. The last investment I want to talk about is our support for emergency medical response teams as we head into the winter and face the Omicron variant. Yesterday, the president announced $20 million in funding to strengthen the Medical Reserve Corps. This is a network of medical and public health volunteers who support understaffed hospitals and healthcare facilities across the country. Together, the Medical Reserve Corps, or MRC, has dedicated more than 2 million hours to their local COVID-19 response, often working tirelessly in under-resourced health centers and often without much recognition. This funding will provide the support they need to continue their heroic work. The president's plan will also create over 60 emergency medical response teams to ensure that hospitals across the country have the help they need to battle rising cases in the winter. In closing, I just want to remind all of us that at this time last year, we were in a very different position. Vaccines were not yet available to anyone, let alone booster shots. Rapid tests were not yet on the market. As a father, I was worried about the health of my children. And as a son, I was worried about my parents. I did not know when they'd be able to get vaccinated against COVID. So I remain immensely encouraged by the extraordinary strides that we made in the past year. Yes, Omicron is concerning, and yes, we're still working toward better understanding it. But there is enough progress behind us to feel both cautious and hopeful. We are on the right track, and we're learning more about how to stay on the right track. Thanks for your time, and I'll turn it back to you, Jeff.
Thanks, Doctor. Before we open up for questions, let me briefly touch on our efforts to vaccinate the rest of the world. The president has been clear from the start. To protect the American people and our economy, we must defeat the virus everywhere. That means we must ensure the rest of the world gets vaccinated. It's in our self-interest, and it's our moral obligation. And under President Biden's leadership, the United States is leading the way. We've committed to donate 1.2 billion doses to the world. For context, that means for every one shot the Biden administration has administered here in the U.S. to vaccinate Americans, we're donating about 3 doses to people around the world. Already, we have shipped, for free, with no strings attached, 291 million doses to 110 different countries. That's more vaccines donated and shipped by the United States than all other countries in the world combined. Yesterday, the president announced we're accelerating the delivery of more vaccines around the globe, 200 million doses in the next 100 days. And just today, we are shipping 11 million doses. 11 million doses in one day. That's more doses shipped by the U.S. in a single day than what all but 7 other countries have delivered in total since the start of this pandemic. Of the 11 million, 9 million are shipping to Africa, bringing our total doses donated to Africa to 100 million. That's American leadership, and we are calling on the rest of the world to step up and join us. We're also continuing to work with partners around the world to turn those vaccines into vaccinations, from supporting communication campaigns to build vaccine confidence, to funding for vaccinators on the front line. We are leading the global vaccination effort. With that, let's open it up for some questions.
Thanks, Jeff. First question, let's go to Dan Vergano at BuzzFeed.
Thanks. I guess this is for Dr. Walensky or Dr. Fauci. What is the point at which we'll know how transmissible or immune evasive the Omicron variant is? Is there a certain data point, or is there a certain number, the share of infections we should be seeing? When does that become clear just how bad this thing is? Thank you.
Dr. Fauci, why don't we start with you?
Yeah, there are 2 phases to that, Dan. One is to take a look when we get the virus in a form to be able to use it as a parameter of antibody neutralization. The other is a much more easily usable one called the pseudovirus. And what you do is you get the sera from people who've been vaccinated, people who have convalescent plasma or monoclonal antibodies, and you measure the capability of those to actually neutralize the virus. Then there will be the clinical indication. That would give you a laboratory prognostication of what you might expect. But then clinically, when you follow, and right now, the South Africans, as we mentioned, because of the volume of cases that they have thus far, are ahead of us in the sense of being able to take a look at differences in protection, immune evasion, severity of disease in people who have either been vaccinated, people who have been unvaccinated, or people who have recovered from prior infection. That's all going to take a matter of maybe a week or 2 more to get the in vitro data, and maybe another additional week or so to get the clinical data. So we expect we're going to have that information to you over the next few weeks.
Next question, please.
Cheyenne Haslett, ABC News.
Hi, thank you. Along the lines of the last question, are we setting people up for sort of a false deadline? Do you think that there will be a moment in the next few weeks where we really have a clear picture, or is it going to take months before we know if Omicron is going to become a dominant variant in the US?
Dr. Fauci?
Well, you have a couple of questions there. The first is it's going to take a while for us to know what the impact is going to be globally and for people who are infected with Omicron. The way you find out whether it's going to be dominant, and the CDC will be able to do that as they continue to follow the percentage of the isolates that are Omicron and the doubling time of that percentage. You might recall months ago when we had 1, 2, 3, 4% of our isolates were Delta, and then we were able to project, and the CDC did do that accurately, to project how long it would take for it to become the dominant one. So we really don't know what's going to happen, how well it is going to compete or not compete with Delta. But we will know as more cases occur and what the doubling time of the relative percentage of Omicron versus Delta will be.
Next question.
Let's go to Rachel Levy at Politico.
Hi, thank you. This is a question on the new rules around testing and insurance reimbursement. Wondering if you could clarify essentially why we are going to have Americans getting reimbursed by insurance And especially, after the holiday surge, wouldn't it make more sense to have the testing essentially be free? The rapid tests that we can buy at the store now are quite expensive, and ahead of the holiday season and increased travel.
So the core of our strategy here is convenient tests where and when they are needed. And we want to make sure we get Americans tested in the most efficient, convenient, and effective way. And thanks to the strong actions that we've taken across the last several months, we have plenty of testing capacity, including increasing availability of quality free tests, at-home tests. These are available now. And yesterday, the president announced additional actions. As you mentioned, more than 150 million Americans on private health insurance will be able to submit receipts for at-home tests directly to their health insurance plan, so they can go in their local pharmacy, they can order online, and then get reimbursed. For those that don't have private insurance, we are making available, starting this month, free tests at convenient places in their communities, like health clinics and community centers. On top of that, we have 20,000 sites around the country, many pharmacies, schools, libraries, health clinics, where people can walk in and get a free test. And so since September, supply has really cranked up. We've quadrupled the supply of at-home tests. The FDA has, in fact, authorized 5 new over-the-counter tests. So we have a total of 8 on the market. So there's consumer choice, and prices are starting to come down. That's up from 0 tests that were on the market when the president took office. So the bottom line here is hundreds of millions of Americans have access to free tests through their insurance, pharmacies, schools, libraries, and community health centers. And the core of the strategy is to make sure the tests are where they are needed and available when they're needed at convenient locations. Next question, please.
Let's go to Meg Tyrell at CNBC.
Well, thanks. I'm wondering, obviously it's too soon to know if we'll need to update the vaccines, but in the event that we do you anticipate that the new vaccines would be the Omicron spike, or would they be some, sort of combination designed to confer broader immunity toward potential multiple variants? And how would that be decided? Would it be similar to flu vaccines where the strains are given to the manufacturers, they're told what to put in the vaccine so it's uniform? Or would the manufacturers be making these decisions themselves, and therefore it could be potentially different? And then what does the regulatory process look like? Would it be similar to boosters where they could be cleared based on antibody data?
So Dr. Fauci, why don't you get us started there? And I think it's important, Meg, to understand that this is a contingency plan that is being developed, that in case we do need an update to the booster or the vaccine. But it is very much a contingency plan. Dr. Fauci?
Yeah, Meg, so the situation is going to be actually multifaceted. And by that, I mean, the data I showed you on my brief presentation indicated that we could probably get a good bit of mileage just from boosting with the ancestral strain vaccine that we already have, for the reasons that I gave in my presentation. But having said that, we are working with the pharmaceutical companies, particularly obviously Moderna, Pfizer, and J&J, on what their plans are. And they do have plans that have multiple contingency. One is to rev up the production of the vaccines that they already have. The next is to make, for example, a bivalent, where you have a vaccine against both the ancestral strain and the new variant. And the other is to make a variant-specific boost. The degree to which they're going to be doing that, they are now assuming they may have to do that and are being prepared for that. With regard to the regulatory issues there, I would have to defer that to the FDA, but in general, it could, and I say could, fall under the same situation as we do with a strain change for influenza. But I would have to leave that determination to the FDA.
And just to build a little bit on that, the FDA has laid out guidance for the manufacturers, the vaccine manufacturers, to understand how the agency will evaluate and expeditiously address the potential impacts of a variant on the vaccines, and how the FDA will move quickly and at the same time maintain its rigorous scientific standards. Next question.
Last question. Let's go to Nate Wexel at The Hill.
Hi, thanks for doing this. Just to, I'm curious about the timeline on the travel restrictions so far. It seems like there is community spread right now in the U.S. It seems like some of these cases were here before the restrictions on the African countries were put in place. Is there a timeline for lifting them? Is there, any sort of, what's the next step there?
So, as we've talked about throughout today's briefing, we are actively monitoring the new variant, addressing the questions that have been raised about transmissibility, severity, and vaccine effectiveness. And as we learn more about the variant over the coming days on all of these fronts, decisions on changes to travel policy will be based on the advice, as they always are, of our health and medical experts. We'll continue to rely on their expertise regarding how we make sure that we keep the American people safe, and that will directly impact the duration of these travel restrictions. Thank you, everybody, for today's briefing. We look forward to seeing you next week.
All right. So that's done. The trial selection is also done. What do we got? I think at 1:30, the White House press conference is going to be live. So I'm likely going to bring that to you. And yeah, as of right now, I'm still planning on doing a show tonight, but that may change. I have no idea, but that may change. My interview, the TikTok interview from last night, is also on YouTube. We interviewed a Houston police officer. It was actually a really good interview. He had some good insights. You can find that on YouTube. What I'll probably do for this weekend, I'll take all 3 interviews that we have up on that YouTube page, and I'll likely just jumble them all as a video, and then I'll play that at one point this weekend. I am going to try to find some new movies for citizenstringer.tv, but we'll figure that out. At any rate, I'm just going to throw some old westerns on Citizen Stringer and Rumble, and we will be live around here. Let me tell you exactly what time that's going to be on. I wouldn't be surprised if she canceled it. No, 1:30. It's scheduled for 1:30, so we'll be back live around 1:30 for Jen Psaki's White House press briefing. We'll see you then. Hold on, I gotta get all this stuff. Yeah, we'll see you then. All right. Let me cut